Welcome to the February Leadership Series, and it is our campus-wide leadership series. And sometimes in tough economic times, people comment on the fact that we provide lunches, and I often forget to thank everyone. The hospital, university, graduate studies, really everyone contributes, have numerous contributors that are listed on the bottom of the sheet. And by putting all the few dollars from each of those groups together, we're able to do this with lunches and make it a little more attractive. Although I think the speakers we've had this year, it's worth coming anyway. And I'm sorry, we can only really handle 125 lunches, so I know there's some people here without food, and I'm sorry. So our speaker today is Coach Bill Snyder. I guess a few people might know who he is. He asked for a very short introduction, so I'll do exactly that. I think the most significant thing in terms of Coach Snyder is the things he's done for the state of Kansas and for young people in the state. He's been very strong in terms of mentoring. He is the honorary chair of the K-State Changing Lives campaign. He, of course, has been enshrined in both the Kansas and Missouri sports halls of fame. And then let's I told him he was preceded by 2 years by having Coach Bill Self here, and Coach Self followed coming here by winning the national championship. So maybe that's maybe an okay precedent. So your timing was probably pretty good. The other thing, I was critiqued for wearing purple today, so I should explain that. I went to the prestigious New York University. And when I was a child, they had given up football, but they actually had a basketball team. But this isn't purple, this is violet, because they were called the Violets. It's the truth. And at the time, I didn't see anything wrong with cheerleaders yelling, "Let's go Violets." But we're off violets, we're on to purple, so we have the leader of the Wildcats to present today on how to lead a bunch of Wildcats, Coach Snyder.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. And I'm pleased that we're not called the Violets. And I kind of wish that if we ever do this again, could we get the boxes with purple on them? Yeah, and I assume all of the red in the audience is for hearts, right? So I appreciate that. But you know what? We really do have wonderful universities throughout, not just the University of Kansas and Kansas State, but the University of Missouri and a lot of other smaller schools throughout each of the two states that really are excellent educational institutions. I appreciate a great deal what you do. I mean, you, in varying roles, you do something very, very special for others. You're people who genuinely care, and that means an awful lot to me. They gave me a variety of different topics, and I don't think there's enough time to cover all of them. Things that are somewhat dear to my heart. Certainly leadership, which was suggested that I might visit about. Mentoring has become extremely important to me in a variety of different ventures that I'm involved with. And I think when you talk about one or the other, you're really talking about guiding and directing, in my case, perhaps younger people more so, but by the same token, guiding, directing, being able to create opportunities for others to become successful. So I think all those things kind of go together. I think the principles and the values of achieving success, providing leadership, really are very much one and the same. On the way up here last night, my wife was reading mail to me, and she had a note that I'm going to read to you, and it doesn't have anything to do with anything that necessarily that we're talking about, but then again, maybe it has everything to do with that. And it came from the husband of a lady, we know the couple, who has been going through cancer, and we can all relate to that. And it was a card. And it really was interesting to me. And I just want to read it to you. It says, there once was a woman who woke up one morning, looked in the mirror, and noticed she had only three strands of hair on her head. She said, I think I'll braid my hair today. So she did, and she had a wonderful day. The next day she woke up, looked in the mirror, and saw she had only 2 strands of hair on her head. She mused. I think I'll part my hair today, down the middle. So she did, and she had a grand day. The next day she woke up, looked in the mirror, and noticed that she had only 1 strand of hair on her head. Well, she said, today I'm going to wear my hair in a ponytail. So she did, and she had a fun-filled day. The next day she woke up, looked in the mirror, and noticed that there wasn't a single hair on her head. Yay, she exclaimed. I don't have to fix my hair today. Attitude is everything. You know, and really that it caught my attention when my wife read that to me, and I appreciate the thought behind it. And I think it does have, you know, an awful lot to do with, you know, how we approach leadership and how we approach, you know, attempting to help others become successful, help ourselves become successful. You know, my background is varied, I think, to a certain degree. The influences on my life, you know, have run through my life. And, you know, I'm 70 years old. And so I've experienced a great deal over that period of time. And the thing that I can relate to as much as anything are the people that have come through my life. I grew up in St. Joseph, Missouri, which is obviously not too very far from here. I was raised by a single parent, which so many young people are today. I was raised in an apartment house that was 4 blocks from downtown St. Joseph, Missouri, because my mother never, ever had a driver's license nor drove an automobile her entire life, had to walk to work. She worked 10 to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week at a department store to help raise me. We lived in, as I said, in an apartment house. We lived in a one-room apartment. Now, that's not a one-bedroom apartment. That's a one-room apartment. So everything was in one room. My bed was a Murphy bed. And some of you are not old enough to recognize what a Murphy bed is. Many of us perhaps are. But my bed came out of the wall. And so my bedroom, you know, got covered up for the good portion of the day. But I had, you know, all my pictures and posters and all those things, you know, on the walls, you know, where that Murphy bed was. I was, you know, and being in front of a University of Kansas audience, I watched in that apartment. I got to watch, I can't tell you what year it was, maybe 1958, 57, somewhere in there, the national championship game between the University of Kansas and North Carolina. And it was a triple overtime game. And the reason I bring it up is because I watched it on the first television set that I, or my family, or my mother ever owned. So I was 18 years old when we had our first television set. It was a 13-inch black and white television set with rabbit ears. And after the regulation time of the ball game, the TV set went on the fritz, and all I could do was hear the triple overtime. So, and Lenny Rosenbluth, and I believe it was Wilt Chamberlain were the two that battled. So that's my KU history. But one of the things that happened during that period of time, as I said, my mother worked extremely hard, and she was a strong disciplinarian, and she was really significant, important in my life. I had grandparents that lived in the community, and my grandfather became a very significant role model for me. And as I grew older, and of course at that younger age, you don't really recognize what it is that you have. You don't recognize the value of the people that surround you quite as readily as you should. But as I grew older, you look back and reflect back on your upbringing and the people that influenced your life, and then you realize, that doesn't need to stop at that early age, there are other people that can have an impact on your life that hopefully that you bring into your life. Well, that's, one of the things that I share with young people in our football program. And, when we talk about leadership or we talk about achieving success, and as I said, I think the values and the principles are really one and the same. And I think there's a process. You are all involved in whatever it is, whatever your role happens to be. There's a process about how it gets done and how it becomes successful. And you don't vary too much from the process. Well, I think one of the things that becomes so significant in anyone's life is to be able, to surround yourself with great people. Surround yourself with people who really want to make your life better, people who want to, people who can, and people who will make your life better. I was fortunate enough to be able to do that, not intentionally at first, but after I learned some very valuable lessons, then it did become intentional. And I have valued that particular quality throughout the entirety of my life. And I've been very blessed to have absolutely wonderful people in my life who have helped make my life much, much better. One of the things that, as we talk about leadership and what we try to project to others and how we try to help them grow and how we try to help them create successes for themselves in their lives, one of the things that we all get involved with is this goal setting thing. And, you've heard so much and talked so much about it. And, one of the things that I've realized over a long period of time is that we don't know, none of us know anyone that doesn't really have goals established for themselves. I mean, whether they happen to be on a day-to-day basis or a monthly basis or a yearly basis, a lifetime basis, career-directed, personally, family-directed, whatever the case may be, everybody has goals that they set for themselves. So, when I talk to young people in our program, I want them to understand that they're, just one of 100% of our world, that creates goals for themselves. Now, but those numbers drop off dramatically. The percentages drop dramatically when you think about anyone that has, or those that have a process about how they would achieve those particular goals. What I try to share with young people in our programs, I think there needs to be a process. And if you can establish a process, prove it to be successful, and continue to work the process, you have a chance to become, successful at achieving your goals. I think what really becomes important for all of us is to understand, we can talk about goals, but, goals are kind of like we experience it on New Year's Day, right? I mean, we save all these things up until January the 1st. Why, I don't know, but we do. And then on January the 1st, we say, here's, I'm going to stop smoking, I'm going to stop drinking, I'm going to stop overeating, I'm going to stop doing this, this, and this. Well, if those are valuable things for us to do, which indeed they are, I don't know why we wait until January the 1st to do it. But really what happens is we say we're going to do it, and we do great in January, we slow down a little bit in February, March becomes a little slower, and at some point in time we're back where we were. I mean, that's just the way it works. And that's unfortunate. And what it really says is we've identified a goal, but we don't have a process about how to achieve it. So what I've, and I think, a process or a way we do things really needs to be as simple as it possibly can be, as long as it can become effective. And what I try to share with the young people in our program is, number one, understand what your priorities are. And that takes some thought. And the value of having people in our lives that genuinely care and want to make our lives better is that they can help us identify, some of the things that really should be significant in our lives. Now, your priorities, each and every one of us in here, have different priorities in our lives. When I talk to young people in our football program, I always suggest, and I'm not so naive to understand or to believe that, that they are always going to follow my advice in this respect. But, we talk about their faith, we talk about their family, we talk about being the best person they can be, about being the best student they can be, and about being the best football athlete that they can be. And my suggestion is there's not a lot of time on the college environment to do much more than that. And hopefully those would be their priorities. Now, all of our priorities are different. One of my priorities is not to be the best football athlete that I can be. Those days have come and gone, and I was the worst football athlete that you could imagine. But nevertheless, the idea that we really can put thought into defining what is important in our lives. And therein lies our goals. So that really is what we want to achieve. Now, as I said, I think the numbers drop dramatically. If 100% of our nation and our world, have established those goals, how many really have a plan in place? As statistics, I read something a long time ago, 7, 8 years ago, and the statistic indicated that number falls in half, that only perhaps 50% of our world really has a plan in place that would allow them to achieve those goals. So the plan becomes awful significant. And therein, once more, lies the value of having special people in your life and people that want to help make your life better, because we can go to others. Sometimes we try to make these kind of decisions by ourselves when we don't have the information that we need, and we can't create the information we need without other people. So to be able to bring others into our lives that want to help, and people that have the capability of being able to provide us, with a step-by-step process or plan by which we can achieve that which we desire to achieve. As I tell young people, if as it relates to your career field as one of your priorities, if you wanted to be a doctor and you wanted to have a plan about how to do it, it just might, be in your best interest to befriend someone that's in that chosen career field who could give you guidance and direction. Makes sense. Pretty simple. Now, the third step is something that my mother tried to teach me, and I'm sure your mothers and your fathers said the same thing to you. My mother said, if you will work as hard as you can be successful in anything you desire. We've all heard that. We all tell our children that. Exactly. But I can remember, having, what I thought were appropriate goals in my life at a young age, and working really hard. So I'd have these goals, and I'd work really hard, and I found myself way out here. And I'm saying, this hard work's not all it's cracked up to be. And I was wrong about that as well. And what I found out was I didn't have that plan in place that would take me in the direction that I wanted to go. But I couldn't do it without the hard work and without the effort. And sometimes we just find it hard to apply the effort that is necessary to take the steps that we want to take in order to get to those goals. The Nike, at the end of this month, I'm going to take a trip with the Nike Corporation. And we've been a Nike school for a long time, and they take a select group of coaches off to some exotic place, and we spend time with Phil Knight, who really is a prince of a guy, very intelligent, and a lot of young people that that are in their early and mid and late 20s who have these ideas coming out of their head they just sit around and think, and that's where all this Nike stuff comes from. But Nike said, they had a slogan that they started many, many years ago, and we know it today. It's made them billions and billions of dollars, and it says, just do it. And that's one of the things that's where the hard work comes into play, and it's a matter of just doing it, You're getting out of bed, you put one foot on the floor, and then you put the second foot on the floor, and then you take a step and you get yourself started. But you've got a process to achieve success. All of us need to take that step. If we're trying to guide and direct other people, we need to provide the motivation that allows them to just do it. Just take the steps necessary to get to whatever step you're trying to take towards achieving those goals. Now, I think what becomes so significant in this process, is improvement. And this is something that we're, in athletics, obviously that we address all the time. But you have to think about it in terms of all facets of our life, whether it's our career fields, our family, whatever is important to us, whatever those priorities are. And what I try to share with young people in our program is, it really, once again, it's a pretty simple process. finding a way to make a little bit of improvement each and every day of our lives in whatever those areas that we possess as priorities in our life is really a pretty simple thing. I remember when I first went to Kansas State, and we didn't have a whole lot of guys. So our room was, the room was as big as this one, and the number of people would have fit in the first 3 rows. We just had very, very few young people in the program. But I remember that we spent countless hours. Every day we would meet, and every day I would talk to this group of young people about finding ways to become a little bit better on a given day in those areas that they had defined as priorities in their life. And certainly it included football as well. And, after a few days, they thought, this too will pass. He'll stop and move on to something else. But it didn't. And after every single practice, I would go into the locker room, and I would go to every young person in the locker room, and I would say, tell me in what area you improved today on the practice field, and how did you go about doing it? They thought I was crazy, every single day. And at first, they didn't have answers, and then pretty soon they realized he's not going to go away. He is going to be here. He's going to ask the same question every day. Better come up with some answers. And so pretty soon they began to have the answers. And what I saw on the practice field was that they were making the attempt, to find a way to become a little bit better. And, of course, we'd give them guidance about how that might happen. But I tried to allow that to expand in all aspects of their life. How can you become a better person? How can you become a better student today? How can you become better with your family, with your faith? How can you become a little bit better each and every day? And they have total control over that. We have total control over that. You think about what your priorities are, and if you sat and thought about it and asked yourself a question, what could I do today to become a little bit better at this thing that's really important to me? You'd come up with a lot of answers. And you have total control over it. And what I tried to share with our young people is, when you think about it, you're a little bit better today, and you add to that being a little bit better tomorrow, and you add to that being a little bit better the next day, and then over a period of a week and a month and a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever the case may be, just envision, where you can go towards being successful, reaching the goals that you want to reach. It was kind of like our program at Kansas State. The program didn't grow out of the sand. It just didn't all of a sudden be successful. It took gradual improvement over an extended period of time. We just got a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. And while we're in the process of doing that, there are dips in the road. We all understand that. So part of that continued improvement is how do we deal with the bumps in the road? These, once again, are things that we would attempt to do to try to help give guidance and direction to others. Leadership, mentoring, however you want to define it. But, what is it we can do in order to work through those bumps in the road? And I think the major thing, it's just a term, but, to me, it's perseverance. We can say perseverance, we can say persistence, we can say not giving up, whatever the case may be. And I think about it, and there's so many stories. I bet each and every one of you have stories in your lifetime. Either yourself, family members, friends, these great stories of persistence. And I've accumulated thousands, and people that I have great respect for. I was not a big history buff, but I've eventually got to the point where I studied a little bit in school. I read a little bit about Abraham Lincoln, and I realized, here was a man of the one thing that he's not recognized for is what I think he probably should be most famous for, and that was persistence. 7 attempts at public office, failed in every single one of them. On his 8th attempt, he became the President of the United States, and a reasonably successful president. During that period of time, he was engaged to be married and lost to an illness his fiancée. A lot of things would have set the normal person back. And these were things that he fought through this great persistence and eventually became extremely successful. I was in a conversation about 6, 7 well, maybe a little longer than that, 8 to 10 years ago. And in this group of people that were talking was a fellow that we all know the name of, Steven Spielberg. And he had an interesting story that I could relate to, but I had never been aware of it. And of course, everybody's been impacted by Steven Spielberg and his works. Steven Spielberg, and this was a story he was telling, grew up wanting desperately to attend the University of Southern California. At that time, the University of Southern California had the premier movie-making, however you define it, program in the world. And he wanted to be a part of it. And when he graduated from high school, made application to go to USC, he was not accepted. Now, it was of interest to me because a long time ago I was what we call a graduate assistant at the University of Southern California. And I enjoyed the school a great deal and learned what a very unique and special school it is. So I could relate to what he was saying. But here was somebody that had this passion for what he wanted to do and couldn't get where he wanted to go, because he just didn't qualify out of high school. Well, fast forward, which he did in the story, many years thereafter, and that college within the university now bears the name Steven F. Spielberg School of, whatever the case may be, So I don't know if that's thumbing your nose at him or what the case may be, but, the point is he didn't give up, and it was that great perseverance. I've been since I was a little tyke, I've been a great fan of Disney, Walt Disney. We've got 8 grandchildren, I've taken every single one of them to Disney World and Disneyland and all those things. We see all those movies. Pinocchio was my favorite. Every child I've ever run into has a videotape now of Pinocchio because there's a great story behind it. But all of these things that came through Walt Disney. But the little known story is that Walt Disney, when he wanted to open a film production studio, went bankrupt in his very first attempt. Tried it again, went bankrupt in his second attempt. Third attempt was successful, and since that time, perhaps the vast majority of our world has been impacted by the works of Walt Disney. Just wouldn't give up. I have a special story in my own life, in the life of my family. Many of you that are K-State fans could relate back many years ago, about 12, 13 years ago, our middle daughter was coming home one evening and had her hand on the doorknob to come in, and a girlfriend of hers drove up and said, Meredith was the daughter's name, said, Meredith, will you come and visit with me? I have some problems. Can we go for a ride? And Meredith, being a good friend, got in the automobile, drove off. The other young lady had been drinking and got up on the highway, drove too fast, went off the road, hit a tree. My daughter went through the front windshield of the automobile, hit a tree, head on, broke her neck, went to a hospital, and had to do immediate surgery. And the neurosurgeon came out after the surgery and said, Coach Snyder, said, your daughter is paralyzed from the neck down, and she will never walk again, and turned around and walked off. And, you can imagine, the feelings. So we put her at Dallas Presbyterian Hospital, and I was there constantly, and she was on a ventilator. Eyes were open, but never was able to acknowledge that anyone was speaking to her, had no idea whether she was hearing what was being said. A dramatic time. After about 2 weeks, I was standing at the foot of her bed, and her big toe went like that. And so I called the nurse in, and I said, this is what happened. And the nurse said to me, she said, well, don't get your hopes up. Said, that's what's called an involuntary contraction. And that she won't, that's not going to be movement. Nothing positive is really happening. And I said, you don't know my daughter. I was tired of hearing the negative side of it. I wish I'd have had that thing that I just read to you at the time. But I said, you don't know my daughter. My daughter will not give in, because that was the kind of person she was. She had this great perseverance about her. Well, not too long thereafter, now there were more movements and more movements and more movements, and pretty soon she could move her legs, and pretty soon she could move her arms, and pretty soon she was able to nod, and pretty soon she was able to speak. And we put her then moved her out of the Presbyterian Hospital and moved her into the Dallas Rehab Center 6 months later. With the aid of a cane, she walked out of the Dallas Rehab Center. That's immense perseverance. Today, and she walks, struggles to walk. She has to have the aid of a cane or a helping hand, and walks rather crudely. She owns and operates 2 businesses. She and her husband have 3 small children who are like tennis balls bouncing off the walls all the time. And she manages that and manages 80 acres of property. She is really a special woman, but she's a special woman because, for a lot of reasons, but the primary reason is because she's had this great perseverance. And so the point I'm making, and we all have stories like that. And when you think, of how easy it is for some to say, I just don't want to, I don't want to put myself in that kind of position. It's too hard. It's too difficult. I can't do it. All those kind of answers. And mentoring and leadership is being able to guide and direct young people or older people, as it may be, towards understanding that, yes, you can. Yes, we can. Part of that is, this thing about expectations. And more importantly, limitations. I mean, all of us have expectations placed upon us. Whoever you answer to, whoever I answer to, whoever young people answer to, parents, family members, coaches, teachers, principals, whoever it happens to be, there are always expectations imposed upon us. And to me, what's really important is not necessarily those expectations, but it's the expectations that we place upon ourselves. And that is created, either positively or negatively by how we view limitations. And unfortunately, we place such dramatic limitations on our capabilities to achieve success. And I think that's a vital thing for all of us to understand is can we eliminate, those limitations that impact, whether we can achieve success or not. And I'm not so sure that we do it with the regularity that we should. I remember the very first meeting that I had with young people at Kansas State University that were in our football program. This was in 1989 when I first went there, the very first meeting we had. And I was there I had chosen to go to Kansas State. I was going to be in Manhattan for 24 hours. I remember the time, I had a flight out at 5 o'clock that particular afternoon, and I'd asked my secretary, Joanne, if she would get in touch with all the graduating seniors, all the young people that had finished their eligibility that I wouldn't have an opportunity to coach. There were 22 of them. All 22 of them showed up for a meeting that afternoon at 3:30. So we didn't have a great deal of time. And I shared with each and every one of them, I'm not here. I don't want you to cast blame or, fault. I just want to get to know you because I'm never going to have the opportunity to coach you. I want to get to know you. And we can have some dialogue. And they were like kindergarten children. Now you have to understand, here are 22 young people that have been in a college environment and a football program, and it was important to them to be able to compete at that level, and not a single one of them had ever participated in a football game in which they had won. Had not won a game. They'd been involved in one tie, and that happened to be with the University of Kansas. So their careers had not gone extremely well. And one by one, they were like kindergarten children. I mean, they were almost standing on chairs to get an opportunity, to speak. And it was so interesting what I heard, and it has impacted me to this day. And, a youngster would get up and say, Coach, you will never see us wear our letter jackets around campus. We're too embarrassed. One youngster got up and said, Coach, he said, Mondays after a game, we don't go to class. We're too embarrassed. Seldom do we go to class on Tuesdays. And even some of us still don't go to class on Wednesdays. And it's not because we don't want to be good students and we don't want to exceed or excel in the classroom. We're too embarrassed to do so. And they went on and on and on about all of these things. And what I drew from all of that was what dramatic limitations they had placed on their abilities to achieve success, not just on the football field, but I could see how it impacted other areas of their lives. And that has been my dialogue with that group of young people since that time. And I communicate with them on a regular basis and addressing just exactly that, is that they're too good to place those kind of limitations on what their capabilities really are to achieve success. One of the things that all of us are involved with on a very regular basis, some more than others, but it's this decision-making process. And when I talk to young people about making decisions, they are cautious, because they believe where I'm going is alcohol, drugs, sexually related issues. They believe that's my intent. They've heard that since they were 2, and it tends to go in one ear and out the other. But that's not my direction. My direction is they're going to make decisions about so many things in their lives. They're going to make career decisions. They're going to make location decisions. They're going to make family decisions. They're going to make faith-based decisions. They're going to make decisions based on maybe bad information sometimes, but they're going to make all kinds of decisions. We all have to make decisions. I mean, and most of our decisions have no impact whatsoever on our successes or failures in life. If you got up this morning and decided to wear a purple tie and a purple shirt, lavender, excuse me, and your life wouldn't have changed if it had been red or black or blue or anything else, But we make some of those decisions that don't really impact our lives, and we make some decisions that have a moderate impact on our life. But, what's really significant is we make a limited number, but we have, will, and are going to make a few decisions, how few I don't know, that will have a dramatic impact on our lives, the rest of our lives, people in our family, and others. And we don't know when they're coming, and we don't know what kind of decisions they're going to have to be. And what I try to share with young people in our program is, first I ask a question. I'd ask you to think about the same question. Do we have a process? Do you have a process about how you make those decisions? And it's my belief that if we have a process and we work the process, that eventually the process either proves itself to be successful or gives us a direction in which we can gradually make some changes in the process that will allow us to have success in making decisions for ourselves or for others for that matter. Now, what I share with our players, and this would not necessarily be true for everyone. I utilize it in trying to make the best decisions that I can in my life. But I ask our players, number one is consider your priorities. And if indeed they're the priorities we talked about, then, or whatever other priorities that you might implement into that group, that any time an opportunity arises for you to make a decision, that you take 30 seconds out of your life. And for those young people, that's not much. For me, that becomes a substantial amount of time sometimes. Step back and ask yourself a question. If indeed I choose to do this, will it help me become better or become successful with my faith, with my family, to be a better person, to be a better student, to be a better football athlete, or whatever your priorities in life might be? And if the answer is yes, then do it, and do it with all the enthusiasm you can muster. And if the answer is no, why in the devil would you do it? And it's a matter of just having the process, because too often we get thrown, something very suddenly in which a decision we think may have to be made rather rapidly, and sometimes we can make bad decisions because we don't have enough information. But it also, in making those decisions, and what I share with young people is, sometimes 10 seconds won't do it. And sometimes you have to be wise enough to understand that I can't do this alone. There are decisions in my life that I couldn't make by myself, that we need to accumulate information. And that's part of, once again, mentoring. That's part of leadership. It's part of a path towards becoming successful. And that we identify those people, once again, that we should surround ourselves with, that want to help make our life better, who can help give us some guidance and give us the information that allows us to make those kind of decisions. Now, those things being said, as I said, I think they are all very relative. Let me just share some thoughts as it relates to mentoring. Mentoring and leadership, again, go hand in hand. And when I retired, Governor Sebelius asked me if I would head an initiative that we created at that time called Kansas Mentors. And in the mission, we chose a mission for Kansas Mentors, and the mission was, excuse me, to be able to provide an opportunity for every young person in the state of Kansas to have access to a quality, caring mentor in their life. Now, and we've made a considerable amount of headway in being able to do exactly that. And one of the things that got me so interested in it was some statistical information that I'm not big on statistics, but I also understand that they have their place and they have some meaning. And one of the things that I came across, a segment of information about youth. And what I learned was that, one out of every two young people in our state and nationwide come from a single-parent home. Okay? And I look up and down my neighborhood, and everybody's in a two-parent home. So I know that there's a neighborhood someplace else where virtually everybody's in a single-parent home. And I understand that. And so there is created a need immediately for great access and great help in terms of mentoring. Also, a statistic that frightens me, one-third of all African American males will be imprisoned. One-third. Now that's frightening when you think about, a lot of young people, whatever their ages might be, that 1 out of every 3 of them has to look forward to being incarcerated, okay? Because they don't have the guidance and the direction that is needed. You remember the Columbine incident many, many years ago. When they interviewed the young people that committed those crimes, the resonating theme was that each one of them expressed that they just didn't have anyone in their lives that they could go to be able to share, learn from, express themselves, and get help from. Every single one of them said exactly the same thing. And we always think, that those kind of things happen someplace else. They happen, that's West Coast or that's East Coast. And we consider Colorado West Coast, don't we? I mean, for a variety of different reasons, I would guess. See? But we think, right here in the heartland of the country, Midwest America, Midwestern values, those things don't happen. Shortly after that, an incident happened in Pennsylvania, it happened in Missouri, and it happened in Riverton, Kansas, not very far from where we are. Okay? So it can happen anywhere. And young people need guidance, they need help, they need mentoring. I bring it up because I think, it's vital in our nation and vital in our state, whether it happens to be the state of Missouri or the state of Kansas or any surrounding state. And I would offer a suggestion, is that if you have never experienced the opportunity to help a young person through a mentoring opportunity, I would encourage you to look into it. An unbelievably rewarding experience. A rewarding experience for a young person, a rewarding experience for that person that serves as the mentor to that mentee. We have a website. It's kansasmentors.org or kansasmentors.gov. And if you have any type of interest whatsoever, I would encourage you to go to the website. It'll take you through, it'll guide you through or questions to ask and answers that you can receive, and how to further the process, how to look into the possibility of mentoring. We have 350 some odd mentoring organizations that partner with Kansas Mentors. We are not a mentoring organization as such. We're there just to try to promote mentoring, throughout the state of Kansas, but we want mentoring to take place virtually everywhere. Another board that, well, let me go back. We're talking about leadership. Many of you have children in college. I've heard from a number of you today that have children at KU or K-State or other colleges and universities. About 13 years ago, at Kansas State, we started a leadership studies program, first one in the United States. Bob Shoup, Susan Scott, and myself got together and developed a program. We had 13 students that were involved in leadership studies. We offered a minor in leadership studies. We have not moved it to a major field of study. We've kept it as a minor. We have 9 colleges at Kansas State University, and leadership, think about it, leadership conduits into every single field of study that you might get into. See, every single individual in this room, you are in a position which leadership can become vital, significant, and very important in what you do. In families, same thing. In communities, exactly the same thing. Leadership is so vital. Today, Kansas State University's Leadership Studies program now houses in excess of 2,300 students. Went from 13 to 2,300 plus. It's the largest single field of study at Kansas State University. And it's very meaningful. Now, there are, at virtually every university, there are either minor fields of study in leadership or there are major fields of study in leadership. And I encourage every one of our players, to get involved, to take a minor in leadership studies, and I would encourage, you to talk to your children about, the possibility of doing exactly the same. It's very, very meaningful. Now, I've probably gone way too long here, and I was asked, we don't have very much time, but I was asked if I'd answer questions. I'd be more than happy to. Let me. Don't go anyplace. Well, let me share a story with you, which our pastor at my church a long time ago told this story, and I love the story. And it was about an author that wanted to write a book about all the great cathedrals and churches all over the world. Got on an airplane, flew to Europe, went to London, went to all these magnificent structures. made an appointment, would go in to each one of the cathedrals or churches and would have dialogue and ask questions of the pastors or the priests that were there. And so the very first one that he went into, they were in the cathedral, and they look up on a wall, or the writer looks on the wall, and there's a golden telephone. There's a sign underneath this golden telephone, and it says $20,000 per call. Well, the author is set back by that, and he asked the priest, he said, tell me about that. The priest said, well, it's pretty simple. He said, you can get on that telephone, you can call heaven, and for $20,000 you can speak person to person with your Lord. I said, wow, that's absolutely amazing. So he continued his travels, and he went all over Europe, and every place that he stopped, amazingly, the same thing took place. Golden telephone, $20,000 a call heaven, speak directly to your Lord. So he, exhausted his tour of Europe, got on a flight, came back to the United States, went up and down the eastern seaboard, exactly the same thing. He was just absolutely amazed. Worked his way across the United States, ended up in Kansas City. I'm not going to tell you which side of the border, but he was in Kansas City. And he went into a cathedral, and again, I'm not going to share which one that is as well, and had made an appointment with the priest, and so they're in the cathedral, and they're talking, and he looks on the wall, and he sees a telephone, but it's one of those old cream-colored telephones that we all grew up with, and there's a sign there. It says 20 cents per call. He said, well, now, wait a minute. He said, this is a little different. He said, let me tell you. The author is talking to the priest. He said, let me tell you my experiences abroad and throughout the eastern half of the United States. And he talked about the golden telephone, $20,000 a call, et cetera, et cetera. And the priest said, well, let me explain. He said, it really is pretty simple. He said, yes, you can get on that telephone and you can call heaven, and for 20 cents you can call or talk person to person with your Lord. But you have to understand something. You're in Kansas City now, and in Kansas City, that's a local call. There we go. All right. All right, Phil, help yourself.
Could you apply that to yourself in terms of what allowed you to make a decision to leave what appeared to be a very comfortable retirement, go back into the pressure-packed arena of coaching college football again?
Well, it really, both of them were pretty simple. I can't tell you that both of them were totally accurate as far as the decisions, but as I look back upon it, I think probably so. The reason I left, well, I knew I had, at some point in time that was going to have to take place. And I wanted to spend more time with my children, with my grandchildren. We have 5 children. We've got 8 grandchildren. I wanted to do that. And I got involved when we retired, I got involved, and I wanted to, I was with on the Kansas Leadership Council. I chaired that. We did the thing with, I was chair of the Kansas Mentors, the director, which I didn't mention a moment ago. I'm on the board of the Kansas Leadership Center that's in Wichita, Kansas right now. And if you want, let me just remind you, if you want some people to come and visit with you, quality dialogue about leadership, then you should contact Ed O'Malley at the Kansas Leadership Center. They're doing an unbelievable job. And then the things that we did with the Leadership Center, or the Leadership Studies program at Kansas State. But, excuse me, there had to be a time. You want to pick the right time when you step down. And I wanted to step down when it wasn't going to be an extremely difficult task for whoever followed. That wasn't going to be an easy thing to do. And I wanted to make sure that things were in place, and I felt at that time that they were, and so the decision was made. 3 years later, making the decision to come back. That was a simpler decision. And I chose to for the same reason that I came to Kansas State. You know, I've said often, I went to Kansas State University not because of football. I mean, it was the losingest football program in the history of college football. It was the only program that had lost 500 games. They didn't tell me that when I went there, but that... But I chose to go because of the people. The very first time, well, the first phone call that I received about the job at Kansas State, they offered me a job over the telephone. I thought that was a little strange. And I wasn't sure where Manhattan was. But when they called, I said, I can't do it. We were still in our season. I was at the University of Iowa. And I said, I can't do it. We still have ball games to play. So a couple days later, they called back and they said, if we wait, would you take the job? And I said, I don't encourage you to wait. If you do wait, I would certainly visit with you about it. Well, they chose to wait. And I went to Manhattan after our season was over and spent time. And I met some absolutely fantastic people, and people that I genuinely care about to this day. They were those people that came into my life and helped make my life better. And I love those people. I went on campus while I was there. And you've often heard it said, you know, John Weefald used to say all the time, you know, the friendliest campus in the world. And I went on campus. This is the middle of December. I'm on campus. It's snowing. It's cold. And I'm standing on a corner. And students are coming by. Instructors, professors, employees of the university are coming by. And I stop people. They have no clue who I am. I don't know who they are. And I'm visiting with them. And I'm just conducting conversation. You know, asking a question here and there. And I spent an hour out there. And I went back to the people who had brought me there and said, I'm going to take this job. And it was, again, the people were so caring. Nobody was in a hurry. Even though it was cold, they had to go to class, they had to do things. They took the time to visit with a complete stranger. Now that and all the other people that I was fortunate enough to meet at that time made a real impact on my decision and made a real impact on my life. And so, you know, my comment has always been, we went to Kansas State because of the people, which was accurate. We stayed at Kansas State. You know, we had all kinds of offers to go a lot of different places, certainly warmer weather, and chose not to. And when we retired, we kept our home in Manhattan as opposed to Arizona, Florida, California, etc. And when, after the 3 years of retirement, and they asked me to come back again, you know, my thought was simply, if I can do this and smooth the water, because Kansas State contingency, I think, was just a little out of sorts. And my only thought about it, the analogy was, you know, if we can smooth the water with all those people that have been so very, very special to me and to Kansas State over the years, then I will certainly attempt to do that. You know, it's not something that I want to be able to do that and then get back into retirement, enjoy my grandchildren, and continue to do the other things that we're doing. I don't know how long that'll take, and if we can. But that was the reason behind the decision to come back. And it was nothing more than that. Once again, both decisions really didn't have as much to do with football as it did with people.
We're just about at 1 o'clock, so...
Yeah, I knew I could string that one out and only have to take one question.
So we have a little gift for you. Sorry I wrapped it in Jayhawk paper. But actually, Marty did the wrapping.
Thank you.